Phobos Marines, of course, act as the vanguard forces of the Space Marines. They often take cover under night and like to perform stealth operations. They do, of course, need captains to lead them, and captains that are proficient in this often wear their Phobos armor continuously, becoming Phobos captains. Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and today we are covering the Phobos Captain, one of which is starring in Space Marine 2 as Captain Acheran. Anyways, the Phobos Captain comes in at 80 points with a fairly standard profile of movement 6 inches, toughness 4, a 3+ save, a 4+ invulnerable save, 5 wounds, leadership 6+, and OC 1. This is a solid enough character stat line for 80 points. In terms of ranged weapons, he has a bolt pistol, as is to be expected, which is one attack that hits on 2s at strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1 at 12-inch range. Then the Instigator Bolt Carbine is precision at 24-inch range with one attack that hits on 2s at strength 4, AP 2, and damage 2, which is a solid gun to blow up a Space Marine. Then in melee is where things start to get a little questionable. He has a Combat Blade, which has 6 attacks that hit on 2s at strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1. This isn't really useful for much except punching down against lightly armored and low toughness enemies, things like guardsmen or I suppose certain Eldar. Then in terms of abilities, he of course has Leader as well as Infiltrate, and then he has Stealth as well. Rites of War is his captain ability, which is once per battle round. You can target this unit with a stratagem and reduce the cost of it by 1 CP, which is a solid ability, though maybe not the most impactful on a guy who can only lead Phobos units. Master of Deceit is his main ability and what you're mainly paying the points for, and this is after both armies are deployed, but before the first battle round is decided, so deciding who goes first. You get to select up to 3 Astartes infantry units, and then you can redeploy them, or, if you so choose, you can put them into Strategic Reserve, regardless of how many units are already in Strategic Reserve. Now, this is something that will generally benefit more skilled players, more so than sort of a beer and pretzels kind of player, like most people are. This is going to be something that's useful when it comes to deployment, where a lot of people do say the game is decided in the deployment phase. And this, of course, allows you to play more games in that area. It can be used to bait things, it can be used to chase after something that thought it might be safe, or otherwise. This is in general a very strong ability, and for only 80 points, it's really not too bad of a price to pay to include it in your army. Now, he is a leader character, so he generally will want a bodyguard, though I don't think he really needs one, as he's mainly here just for his redeploy. In terms of an eliminator squad, they're always solid as they can move quite quickly, and also offer some sniper fire, which this guy also adds a little bit to with his precision bolt, infiltrator, his bolt carbine. I can't remember the first name of it. Then incursors, he doesn't have much value with because incursors rely on their scout move, and he has no scouts, so he's kind of a dead option there. And then again with Reavers, this guy doesn't have deep strike, which means he's getting rid of the Reaver's only positive attribute. Don't run this guy with Reavers. And then weirdly enough, I think scouts might actually be his best option as a leader unit. They're the cheapest unit he can lead. They have the keywords necessary to work with this guy. He's not really holding them back. And if you want to buy in the infiltrator or the redeploy, and you want to keep this guy somewhat safe on a backfield, I mean 65 points for some pretty tough bodies is really hard to go wrong with. So including this guy with some scouts isn't really going to hurt your points cost or your army, as this will help open up some extra opportunities for deployment. Though, as I mentioned earlier, if you just want this guy to cower behind a building all game that can maybe do some secondaries like deploying teleport homers or similar, I don't think that's a bad option, as you're mainly just buying him for his redeploys, but that does have its restrictions, as we'll cover in the best use section. Before we cover that, though, we are going to cover the various detachments available to the core Space Marines. Gladius is, I've said this song and dance a million times, it's take all comers. Devastator Doctrine, is always good, as you always generally want him to be on the move, and him being able to use free runaway is good, as his unit will usually be quite fragile. And then in terms of Anvil, there is at least something to be said here with infiltrators. They have a battle drill recall, which gives you 5+ sustained hits if you stand still, and you'd be at +1 to wound, which would make them actually a pretty nasty sniping threat, and you could do it for free. Though that may be a slightly more niche use, maybe not something to build around, but if the opportunity presents itself, these guys could blow up a character pretty efficiently, especially one that's toughness 4 or lower. And then in terms of Firestorm, Assault always pairs well with fast-moving utility options. And Eliminators specifically, they appreciate being able to move and get better positions along with their free move after they shoot. In terms of Stormlance, more speed is generally a good thing. However, it doesn't pair super well with this guy, but it could be useful if you're running some foot-slogging infantry units, something like, say, Terminators or Blade Guard Veterans, and you place them in a situation where you want to bait something out and then you want to redeploy them somewhere else. It's also faster for them to get to melee, while also maybe keeping them a little bit more safe, though there's nothing specifically there for him that is super useful, as he's not a melee beast or anything. In Vanguard, I don't think he's outstanding or anything, but he's about as solid there as he can be. And you could give him the Ghostweave Cloak if you don't want to buy him a unit to lead, as that keeps him safe and would allow him to camp in the backfield, and would also keep the redeploys pretty cheap. And then the First Company Task Force, there's not much of a reason to bring this guy. He doesn't really have much synergy there, and in general, First Company Task Force isn't super useful, though if you're running a big unit of Terminators, he could be useful for redeployment, which is one of the ways to run that detachment if you wanted to, but on his own, there's really not much synergy there. So as we've obviously been talking about, the main thing you're buying with this, guys, is the redeploys. Just running him on his own, I think, is fine. Only 80 points really isn't super expensive for the ability to play games and deployment, which is always super useful, though it is army-specific. Part of like what I mentioned with the Iron Storm, it's not super useful with Iron Storm because they're vehicles, you can't redeploy them, and they're usually not going to be going for big infantry death units. But if you are running infantry units that might have to foot slog, this guy's honestly a pretty solid choice. For example, you place them in a position so your enemy, who's saying, let's just say guard, places their Lehman Russ Executioner right in their line of fire, so obviously they would get lit up immediately. This guy can put them in a place where their flank is maybe unguarded, or something along those lines. It is a common saying that the game is won in deployment before the game even begins. And this guy lets you play games in that deployment phase. And honestly, I think his main weakness is that he's a leader unit. So he generally does want to lead someone just to keep him safe, as while his stats aren't bad for a character, he generally wants someone to keep him safe. But as I mentioned, I don't think any of his squads synergize super well. If you want him to be leading something, just bring scouts. Dead simple. I think that infiltrators are much better with the librarian, and honestly the same with the eliminators. And reavers are 100% better with the lieutenants, and then incursors don't pair really well with any of them because I don't think any of them have scouts. But this guy is nice insurance and allows you to, as I mentioned, bait deployment for things that would chew up your infantry very quickly. It's something Space Marines often faces. Their Space Marines are tough, but not to the certain weapons. So if you can bait those weapons, like a giant plasma cannon or auto cannon, to deploy on one side of the board, and then you just scoop up your dangerous infantry and plop them down elsewhere, that is a valuable thing. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time.